The old man set the medal on the counter beside the bag of dog food and asked, very quietly, if it would be enough. It was a bronze star. The ribbon faded to a dull rose, and he slid it across the worn formica the way a man slides across something he has already grieved. The teenager at the register didn't know what it was. "We don't take like jewelry," the kid said, not unkindly. The old man nodded as though he'd expected nothing else, and began counting the coins from his palm instead, coming up short, his hand trembling over the last few. Behind him in line, a man set down his own basket. Beside that man, a German shepherd had gone completely still, eyes fixed not on the dog food but on the old man's face. The Marine said nothing yet. He had learned a long time ago that the first thing you do is watch. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. This story moves you, please subscribe and stay until the very end. What you're about to hear will restore your faith in the people who are still out there quietly paying attention. Let's see how far this journey takes us together. His name was Cole Drake, and he was 42 years old, built broad through the shoulders and chest, the way men stay built when discipline has long outlived the reason for it. His dark hair had gone gray at the temples, cropped close out of habit. A thin scar traced the line of his jaw and disappeared under his collar, the kind of mark a man stops explaining after the 10th time. But it was the eyes people noticed and then looked away from, cold gray, restless, the eyes of someone who never truly stopped scanning rooms, exits, and the hands of strangers without asking permission, and then, having measured, let you be. He moved through the world with the permanent stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove. Not aggression, its opposite. He was not unfriendly by nature. Life had simply sanded down the parts of him that used to speak first. He watched more than he talked, and when he finally did move, he moved all at once, the way still water becomes a flood. Fallujah had taken friends. The years after had taken the illusion that peace meant quiet. Now Cole lived in the narrow space between discipline and distance, in a worn-down farm town in southern Iowa where nobody knew his name, which was exactly how he'd wanted it. Cole had served 12 years in the Marine Corps, the last 7 as a military working dog handler with 2 tours in Anbar Province and 1 in Helmand. He'd left after a roadside blast outside Fallujah, killed the Lance Corporal Walking Point, and put enough metal in his hip that the surgeons spent 5 hours deciding what to leave. The medical discharge had come with a folded flag for another man's mother and a limp that woke him on cold mornings. He had carried more men than he could comfortably count, and he had come home to a country that thanked him in airports and forgot him on every road in between. What he carried was simple and heavy. He had spent 12 years standing between people who couldn't protect themselves and whatever wanted to hurt them. And then the Corps had told him he was finished. He had never worked out what a man like him was supposed to do with a life that no longer needed him. So he'd taken a small place outside this Iowa town and did equipment repair for the farmers nearby, and fixed what was broken, because at least a man could finish that. He understood the exact weight of a medal. He had a few of his own in a sock drawer he never opened. He had stopped in for dog food and feed store nails on an ordinary afternoon, expecting nothing, the way he expected nothing from most afternoons. The German shepherd at Cole's side was named Sarge. He was 6 years old, 90 pounds of black and rich amber, his coat darkened along the spine and across both ears, his body built like something assembled for a single purpose. His left ear carried a clean notch where shrapnel had passed through it on a road outside Ramadi, an inch from ending him. He moved with the clean, controlled confidence of a trained canine who had long ago learned the difference between noise and threat, and he wasted nothing. No motion, sound, no attention that wasn't earned. Sarge had been Cole's working dog overseas, retired and adopted after the discharge, 8 months of fighting the bureaucracy, filing the same forms over and over until someone signed off just to be rid of him. Sarge had never left his side since. He was routine, warning system, witness, and in the lonelier corners of the last few years, the closest thing Cole had let himself call family. Right now, the dog had locked onto the old man at the register and gone still. The soft, urgent pull in his body that he made when something in front of him was wrong and someone needed help. The town was called Drysdale, set in the rolling farm country of southern Iowa, where the corn ran to the horizon, and the main street had more empty windows than full ones since the plant closed. That afternoon, the autumn light came in low and gold through the dusty front glass of the farm and feed store, the smell of seed corn and machine oil and old wood floor thick in the air, the kind of place that had served 3 generations and was barely hanging on into a 4th. It was an honest town that had fallen on hard years, pride ran deep and money ran thin, and where an old man trading a war medal for dog food was the kind of quiet desperation that happened more. Anyone admitted, and that everyone had learned to look politely past. The man whose shadow lay over the old veteran's troubles was named Wade Vance, and he held the paper on half the town. His family had run the bank and the land leasing company for 2 generations. The Vance name was on the grain elevator and the only decent building left on Main Street. Wade had a way of buying up the farms of struggling old men for pennies when the notes came due, of making the foreclosure paperwork move faster than any relief ever could. He had learned early that consequences were for other people. 46 years had taught him nothing to the contrary. He owned the building the feed store rented, too, which was its own kind of leash on a town. What people knew about Wade Vance was that he'd called in the note on more than one widow and veteran The cattle prices dipped. What they knew was that the farmer who'd organized neighbors against his lease terms had suddenly lost his own financing. What they knew was that you did not cross Wade Vance in Drysdale, so when an old veteran who'd farmed his whole life ended up counting coins for dog food, the town felt the shame of it and said nothing, because the man who'd squeezed him dry could squeeze any of them next. The old veteran was named Walter Briggs, 78 years old. He wore his decline with quiet endurance. He'd been a Marine in Vietnam. The bronze star on the counter had been earned carrying a wounded man through a paddy under fire, a thing he had never once spoken of. He'd farmed the same 80 acres for 50 years until Wade Vance's land company called in a predatory lease note and took the ground out from under him, leaving him in a rented room with a fixed pension that didn't stretch and one living thing that depended on him. An old dog, the last of a long line of farm dogs, that he loved more than he loved his own comfort. Walter did not complain. He had decided he would go hungry before that dog did, and when the coins ran short he had reached, with great reluctance, for the only thing of value he had left. He had stopped expecting the world to be fair a long time ago. He carried himself with dignity first. He'd worn his good cap into town and counted his coins in a steady, practiced way, and when he offered the medal he did it without a speech, sliding a piece of his own history across a counter to feed a creature that loved him. The contrast was the whole injustice in a single image. A man who had carried a wounded brother through fire, reduced to trading the proof of it for a bag of kibble, town whose richest man had taken his land. Cole saw the medal on the counter first. He knew the shape of a bronze star from across a room. He had one in a drawer he never opened. Then he saw the old man's trembling hand over the short pile of coins, the Marine Corps emblem worn nearly smooth on the good cap. Sarge let out a low sound and stepped forward. The signal Cole knew meant look closer. You're missing something. Cole went very quiet, the way he used to go quiet right before everything happened at once. He stepped up to the counter, easy, set a 20 down beside the old man's coins before the kid could say another word. Cover the difference, Cole said to the teenager. Put the medal back in his hand. That's not for sale. Then to the old man, gently, mourning. That's a bronze star. Walter's jaw tightened with the particular shame of a proud man helped in public. I don't take charity, son. It's not charity. It's one Marine settling a tab for another. Cole nodded at the cap. What's your name? Briggs. Walter Briggs, Vietnam. The old man's chin came up even as his eyes filled. "And who are you to know what this is? Drake Marines, 12 years. Got a couple like it in a sock drawer." Cole closed the old man's fingers around the metal. "They don't belong on counters, you know that." Sarge walked to Walter Briggs and sat down against his leg, uninvited, and leaned his weight into the old man. Walter's free hand found the notched ear without his quite deciding to. The dog had chosen. Wade Vance did not back down, because men like Wade Vance never back down from something they believe they own. Over the days that followed, Cole learned the shape of it. He bought Walter's dog food, and then a month's worth more, drove the old man home to the rented room, the old farm dog he was starving himself to feed. And each day he learned a little more. He learned the 80 acres had been taken on a lease-to-own note, written with terms no one could meet, the kind Vance specialized in. He learned Walter had never been clearly told what he was signing. He learned the land had gone straight into the Vance Company, at a fraction of its worth, and that Walter Briggs was not the first old farmer maneuvered off his ground, and left with nothing but pride and a hungry dog. The ally arrived in the form of a woman named Carol Reyes, who'd worked at the bank until she quit over exactly these notes and still lived in town, who'd heard a Marine had stood up at the feed store counter. "You're the one who covered Walter Briggs," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd kept copies of the lease notes the year before she left. Proof the disclosures were buried and the terms were predatory, against Walter and several others. She'd sat on it for years, because Vance held the paper on half of Drysdale. She gave Cole a name, a state attorney general's contact, who handled elder financial exploitation and predatory lending, county legal aid lawyer who didn't owe the Vance family a thing. Sarge felt the temperature of it before Cole named it. Past the Vance land office, now the dog sat rigid in the truck, eyes fixed on the doors. Each time Cole brought him to Walter's rented room, Sarge lay down between the old man and the door, the old farm dog curled up beside him, quiet guard over a veteran the whole town had let be robbed. Cole let him stay. For the first time since the land was taken, Walter Briggs sat in his small room and was not alone in it. Cole made the call that night and laid it out flat. The predatory lease-to-own note, the buried disclosures, the 80 acres taken at a fraction of value, the pattern against other old farmers, and Carol Reyes's records. He didn't raise his voice. He'd been trained to brief command, and he briefed it. "You've done this before," the lawyer said. "Seen enough of it," Cole said. Wade Vance moved first, the way the powerful always do when they feel the ground shift. Word reached him that a stranger was asking about the Briggs note, and Wade did what his family always did. He moved to finish it. He filed to evict Walter from the rented room he also happened to own. On a technicality, pushed to record the final transfer of the 80 acres to bury the deal beyond unwinding. Scheduling it for a Friday he assumed no outsider could reach. He even put it about that the old man was confused and couldn't manage his affairs, poisoning the well in advance. He had not counted on a Marine who'd already put the proof in the right hands. Walter heard they meant to put him out of even the rented room and understood, with the terrible clarity such men have, that the man who'd taken his land was now going to take his roof, and that the law in this town had always belonged to the Vances, and always would. For a moment, even Walter Briggs, who had carried a man through fire, felt the bone-deep weariness of the proud and the robbed. He set the bronze star on the windowsill where the morning light would hit it, and reached for his cap, because the only thing left to do was face it standing up, alone. Then Cole's truck was already outside the Vance land office that Friday morning, ahead of the recording, because 12 years had taught a man named Cole Drake to be there before the paperwork could be made permanent. The confrontation came in the Vance land office, where Wade Vance had gathered to finalize the transfer, and where Cole walked in with the county. Legal aid lawyer Carol Reyes and Walter Briggs in his good cap. Sarge walked in at Cole's heel and laid down flat in the center of the office, between Vance and the old Marine, 90 pounds of decision, amber eyes fixed on Wade Vance with the steady, terrible patience of an animal that knew exactly what a bad man looked like. The room had gone quiet, not silent. Quiet, the kind of unnatural drop in sound that trained people notice immediately. Cole stepped forward, slow, his bad hip stiff under him, and nobody moved. "You'll want to put that paperwork down," Cole said. Wade Vance leaned back, smooth and certain. "That man signed a lease note he didn't honor. This is a lawful transfer, and you've brought a strange animal into my place of business. I'll have you removed. Do you have any idea who I am in this county?" "My name's on the elevator. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Drake," Cole said, and his voice never rose. "United States Marine Corps. 12 years, 3 deployments. 7 of those years I had exactly one job, standing between people who couldn't protect themselves and the men who wanted to hurt them, so no. I don't much care whose name is on the elevator." He nodded at the old man beside him. "But I'll tell you who this is. Walter Briggs, United States Marine, Vietnam. A Bronze Star he earned carrying a wounded man through a paddy under fire. The same medal he tried to trade for a bag of dog-ant food this week, because you took his 80 acres on a note built to fail. You had him counting coins to feed his dog. You're trespassing." "This is the Attorney General's office," the legal aid lawyer said, stepping forward as 2 state vehicles pulled up out front, "investigating elder financial exploitation and predatory lending. We have the note. We have the buried disclosures. We have the transfers, Mr. Briggs's and the others you ran the same way. And we have the bank records, Miss. Reyes kept before she walked out, rather than write one more of these." She set a folder on his desk. "Nothing recorded today. Nothing recorded at all, until the states had a long look at every note with your family's name on it." Vance's smooth voice climbed and cracked. "You can't prove a thing. My family built this town. I'll have your truck, your name, and that mutt put down by the end of the—" "This isn't over," Wade tried. But the words came out smaller than 2 generations of the Vance name had ever let them come. It was over. He just hadn't caught up to it yet. The state investigators came into the land office unhurried, and they had the notes and the disclosures, and the years of records Carol Reyes had been too afraid to use until a Marine and a dog gave her the nerve. They took the transfer paperwork. They took Wade Vance in for questioning in his own office in front of the staff and the half-dozen townspeople who'd drifted in off Main Street when the state cars parked. People who'd owed the Vances and feared them for years, now watching it happen. A woman by the door covered her mouth with her hand. Nobody spoke for a long time after that. Cole didn't watch them lead Vance out, turned to Walter Briggs, who stood with one hand resting in the thick fur of Sarge's neck, the worn cap in his other hand. Walter looked at him. The dignity he'd held through the loss of his land and the shame of the counter finally broke, gently, the way old ice breaks in spring. "Why'd you stop?" Walter asked. "Whole town watched it happen. Why'd you stop and they didn't?" Cole looked at his dog leaning into the old Marine. "Sarge stopped first," he said, his hand on the dog's back. "And a man who'd trade his own Bronze Star before he'd let his dog go hungry, that's a man worth stopping for. Always was. You just needed somebody whose tab Wade Vance didn't own." 8 months later, the late spring sun came down warm and golden over 80 acres of southern Iowa bottomland, the corn just up in green rows, farmhouse with fresh paint on the porch where an old man sat in the evening light. Cole sat on the step with a cup of coffee, his bad hip stretched out long, and Carol Reyes, who'd found honest work again once the state cleaned out the Vance Company, sat beside him with iced tea, and neither of them said much because they didn't need to. Out in the yard, black and amber German Shepherd lay easy in the grass beside an old farm dog gone gray in the muzzle. The 2 of them watching an old Marine walk his own fence line again, slow but upright, on ground that was his. The state had unwound it. Predatory notes were voided. The 80 acres returned to Walter Briggs free and clear. The other old farmers maneuvered off their land, were getting their day, and their ground back, too. The Bronze Star hung framed on Walter's living room wall now, where it belonged, where no counter would ever hold it again. His old dog ate well. So did he. Wade Vance had been convicted of elder financial exploitation and predatory lending fraud after the audit documented 2 generations of notes written to take the land of the old and the struggling. He'd been sentenced and ordered to full restitution. The Vance name had come quietly off the grain elevator that spring. The town people said, breathed easier once no one had a reason to be afraid. Cole still fixed the farmer's equipment around Drysdale. The metal in his hip still woke him on cold mornings. But on the first Saturday of every month, he drove out to the farmhouse on the 80 acres. An old Marine raised a hand from the porch, and 2 dogs came across the yard to meet him. A man who had spent years not knowing what he was for found he had finally quietly worked it out. Sarge walked that ground like he belonged to it, lying down in the grass beside the old farm dog of his own accord, his tail moving slow and easy. Peace had arrived. The story was over. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder from the sky. Sometimes they're already standing in line behind you when you slide a medal across a counter because a dog went still and a man chose not to look politely away. The world isn't saved by superheroes. It's saved by ordinary people who refuse to let a proud man's quiet desperation pass unanswered, by animals who carry a loyalty that human language has never been quite able to hold. God does not always restore what the greedy take the moment they take it. But he places, at the right hour and the right worn-down counter, someone who knows in his own bones exactly what that medal cost, and what it means that a man would part with it before he'd let the creature he loves go hungry. Walter Briggs tried to trade his Bronze Star for a bag of dog food because he believed the world had no more use for an old soldier. Its honor, only its resale value. He was almost right. The miracle wasn't that a stranger paid for his kibble. It was that another Marine understood, a single glance, that a man willing to give up the proof of his courage to feed something he loved had never lost an ounce of that courage at all, that a dog knew it before any of them said a word. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that no act of quiet sacrifice goes truly unseen, that someone will still stand up for the ones who gave everything. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us, you ever watched someone part with something precious for love? Or been helped by a stranger exactly when your pride was all you had left? Your story may be the one that reminds another person not to look politely away. And if you believe in stories of service, loyalty, the quiet courage of ordinary people, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, bring peace to your home, and watch over every old soldier who ever weighed his honor against his hunger, every faithful dog who never once doubted he chose right.